Appreciates it.
You got it.
Good chair, we're live.
All right, well, welcome. This is the September 2nd meeting of the Thurston Regional Planning Council. I'm going to call the meeting to order and we'll start with introductions. I will go through and read members. If you are representing a voting member, please introduce yourself and then I'll hand it off to Vina to introduce staff from TRPC and others. So let's start with City of Olympia. How about City of Lacey?
Hi, I'm Robin Vasquez from Lacey.
Hi, Robin. How about City of Tumwater? And Thurston County?
Good morning. I'm Scott Lindblom. I'm the county engineer. I'm sitting in for Commissioner Edwards this morning.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for being here.
You bet.
And Rainier?
Dennis McVeigh.
Dennis is here in person. Hi, Dennis. How about the great city of Tenino?
Greetings and salutations, one and all. This is John O'Callahan, again, representing the great city of Tenino.
Hi, John. And Yelm, City of Yelm?
Joe DePeno here for the city of Yale.
Hi, Joe. Yokota. How about the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis? Nisqually Indian Tribe. North Thurston Public Schools. Tumwater School District.
Mel Murray, Tumwater School District.
Hi, Mel. And I'm here, Hillary Seidel, representing the Olympia School District. How about Intercity Transit?
Hi, I'm Don Melnick, authority member subbing for Mayor Debbie Sullivan.
Hi,
Good
Don.
morning,
Thanks-
everybody.
Thanks for being here, Don. Lot Clean Water Alliance.
Hi, Carolyn Cox representing Lot.
Hi, Carolyn. Port of Olympia.
Bob Ariel here for Port of Olympia.
I'm so used to looking at the screen. Bob is here in person. Yay. And PUD of Thurston County. How about Thurston Conservation District?
Hi, good morning. It's Helen Whately from the Conservation District.
Hi, Helen. And the Lacey Fire District, also in person.
Hi, Rick Kelling from Lacey Fire District.
All right, Puget Sound Regional Council. How about the Evergreen State College?
Scott Morgan with Evergreen.
Hi, Scott. Beautiful fall foliage behind you, or beginnings of it. And how about Thurston EDC?
Good morning, Michael Cade.
Hi, Michael. And Timberland Regional Library.
Good morning, Cheryl Haywood.
Hi, Cheryl. Okay, did we have anybody else join while we were in the middle of roll? I don't think we did. Do we have Olympia or Tumwater or Bucota? Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis, Nisqually Indian Tribe, North Thurston or PUD? Did those join? Okay, I'm gonna hand it off to you, Vina, to do staff introductions.
Good morning. So I'm Vina Tabit, the Deputy Director here at TRPC. Mark Daly is out on vacation. And then in the room with us, we have Karen Parkhurst, Tyson Justice, who is, so we can introduce him. He's our new HR and Finance Manager as part of our transition. He was our senior accountant. Dorinda O'Sullivan, we're behind in the corner there. And then also we have, let's see, we've got a full house here today. We've got Berlina, who's in her office. Dave Reed is also here on site. Michael Ambrogi, Sarah Selstrom, Teresa Julius, Katrina Van Every, Paul Brewster, Allison Osterberg, Amy Hatch-Winnica, and Erin Grimes are also on. And then as far as our partner staff, we have Mary Heather Ames from Tumwater. We have Anne Freeman Manzanares, Eric Phillips, and Jessica Gould from Intercity Transit. Matt Unselman from Thurston County and Joyce Phillips from Olympia. Did I miss any of our partner staff or any of our staff? Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Vina. And that takes us to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, John O'Callahan.
Is there a second?
Second, Robin
Second, Don
Vasquez.
Melnick.
2 seconds. The enthusiasm. All right, it's been moved and seconded. We approve the agenda today. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signal by saying aye.
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 Or raise your hand. Any opposed? And any abstentions? Great, the agenda is approved. That brings us to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved, John O'Callahan.
We've got double motions. How about Dennis? Dennis makes the motion for that one, and John, will you second?
Sure, make it so.
Right, it's been moved and seconded. We approve the consent calendar for today. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signal by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? Great, the consent calendar is approved. That brings us to public comment. My understanding, we don't have anyone signed up for public comment today. Is that correct, Berlina?
That's correct.
Okay, great. That takes us to our other business, and we're going to start with joyful or sad moment, depending on your viewpoint. We are saying goodbye to one of our beloved staff members who is moving on to new adventures. Vina is serving as in Mark's place today for her last meeting. And so we're going to do some recognition of Vina. And we'll start with some notes that were provided to me by staff and some reflections. We have a video to share, and then we'll open it up for anyone to share any gratitude or reflections as well from the membership. So I would like to start just by sharing a little bit about Vina and all that she has meant to the organization over the many years that she has served. Vina joined TRPC in August of 1998 as a temporary GIS analyst. This is how all great planning stories start, right? She moved to full-time in 1999 and has served as an associate planner, a senior planner, research and data director, interim executive director, and currently deputy director. She holds a master's degrees in geology and environmental studies. For over 20 years, Vina has been involved with or led almost every project or program that TRPC has done. These are corridor projects such as Boulevard Road in West Bay, to buildable lands and the profile, my personal favorite, to major initiatives such as Sustainable Thurston and the Energy Grant. On the leadership team for Sustainable Thurston, Vina helped keep track of all the budgets and federal requirements and kept all of them on track and on budget. She has built a strong modeling and GIS team here, resulting in great products and tools to serve the membership and the greater community. Vina understands the value of having and following strong rules and policies. When it comes to grants, personnel issues, federal and state requirements, she keeps the agency in line, but always with an eye on efficiency. Vina's work on our internal policies over the past 5+ years has helped us manage the significant upheaval from the COVID compliance requirements and find ways to drive greater community engagement through compensation for committee membership, surveys, and focus groups. And I suspect the phrase around here for quite some time will be, what would Vina do? Vina is a strong champion for equity and in planning and hiring. And like most organizations here at TRPC, we've started to have richer conversations about what equity means for our community. And we've had to confront the fact that we aren't always really very representative of our community as an organization. And from the very beginning, Vina has thought about how to put our conversations into actions that will directly benefit our community and find ways to get more representative engagement from the community in multiple aspects of our work. Some ways that people describe Vina are seasoned and successful grant writer, fiercely loyal to TRPC and its members. I would echo that as well. Curious, strong staff advocate, a person with integrity, honesty, collaborative, humble, she's probably really uncomfortable right now, highly intelligent, a person with great clarity and trust. It strikes me that most of these words also align with TRPC's value and mission. And so it's really no wonder that members often ask Vina to participate in advisory groups for their projects and programs. She is also called to serve on employee hiring and consultant selection committees for both local and state partners. Vina is also the only person many people in this room, in this organization know, who served in the Canadian Navy and enjoyed curling as part of her school physical education curriculum. I'll have to learn more about this exciting PE curriculum. She also helped many people here understand that the World Cup is a big deal. We will miss her wit, her intelligence and diligence, her creativity and team spirit. Vina, you exemplify so much of what TRPC aspires to do in our community. Thank you for the time you have given to us and to your community. You have set us up for success, and we will not, or we will try not to forget all that we have learned from you. We wish you all the best in your next adventures. So now I think we have a video, correct, Berlina?
Yes, so Vina and Mark couldn't be here, so he put together a little video for you. So let me go ahead and get that started.
Hey, everybody. I really wish I could have been there today to help recognize Vina and all she's done for the Thurston region. I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and I truly can say that Vina is one of the all-time best. She's exceedingly smart. She has a truly steel trap mind. She's very, very good at breaking complicated issues into bite-sized pieces that then we can deal with. And most importantly, she's a kind and empathetic leader. Her work and influence can be seen in projects throughout the region. And with our mandate being long-range planning, Vina's work will help improve our region for years to come. I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to work with you, Vina, and I will miss that greatly. She's done an excellent job at helping us transition and cross-train over the past several months, which has helped make us ready for her departure. I don't like goodbye, so instead, safe travels, Vina, and thank you for everything with a capital E. Thank you. Hi, everybody.
That was nice, and I would echo all of those sentiments. And on a personal note, I haven't been with TRPC for very long, but from the very beginning, Vina, that kindness has shown through so much. You've made me feel so welcome, helped me understand the processes that are in place, and really helped me find my lane to live out my values in the organization. And I think that's one of your greatest strengths, is you look for systems to empower the members to live into the mission. So thank you for that. I would love to open it up to the membership. If anyone else would like to share some reflections or words of appreciation, you can use the raise hand feature if you like, and I will call on you. Or if your raise hand button isn't working, I will try and look and see if you are raising your hand. I see Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
Unmute. I'm unmuted, I guess.
You are.
Good. Just joined you guys. Want to say words of appreciation to Vina. She's always been a very professional person, and I've been around the TRPC for a long time, and I've seen some excellent people in the past, but Vina has always been the most consistent, and to my mind, just characteristically enjoys her work. So I think, knowing a little bit about her background and especially her husband and whatnot, I just want to say that she's always been first rate the whole time I've been involved with the organization. And I really appreciate her contributions and how she's helped others work better which just makes the whole place run better. Thank you very much, Vina.
Thank you, Chris. Michael?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Vina. Vina, thank you for all of your time and attention that you provided us. It's interesting, as I was kind of thinking about coming to this meeting this morning on my way to work, started thinking about all the projects that have intertwined with TRPC, and at the central piece of that, you were at the central element of that. Think about the sustainable Thurston, and those are tenets that we use and practice every day now in our organization. It's been very impactful to how we think about economic development and community development, certainly in the public outreach and the public involvement of the work that we do. Think about the work that we did and that we are doing in South County, and especially around the agriculture world. That was a lot of the work and lessons that you imparted upon us, certainly during those sustainable Thurston, as well as make sure that when we do work, we look for partners, and we look for ensuring that our partners are healthy and whole. And then the last thing is make sure it's a positive impact upon the community. And I think the last thing I would thank you for is you were actually one of the first persons I met 2004, 2005. I can't remember when I came here at the TRPC. We started talking about population growth and understanding the mechanisms and the realities of what population growth means for a community and how you plan for it. So I wanted to thank you for that. Seriously, it's been very impactful to our organization and me, as well as a professional economic developer. You've been a big impact upon the work that I do here. So thank you, safe travels, and let's stay in touch, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Is there anyone else in the meeting who would like to share a message for Vina?
I'd like to thank Vina on behalf of the leadership of the district and the Board of Fire Commissioners, to include former Commissioner Dobry. Thank you for your service to the
Thank you, Rick. Robin, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I also haven't been with TRPC for very long, but I remember I visited TRPC meetings a few times before I was elected, back when they were still all in person. And I just remember Vina being very kind and welcoming, even though I was just a random citizen at the time visiting the meeting. So Vina, I wanted to say thank you for your kindness and for making people feel welcome all this time. And good luck.
Yeah, I totally agree. Super welcoming. Any other expressions or messages that anyone wants to share in person or online?
Yeah, this is Don Melnick. I wanted to acknowledge Vina's patient leading of the Transportation Policy Board that I sit on also, through a lot of really complex adventures, and really appreciated your patience with us, and acknowledge when you leave a lot of institutional memory, not to take anything away from continuing staff who's going to go out the door, and wish you well in your future journeys.
Thank you, Don. Carolyn.
Vina, I want to thank you for all the great work you've done over the years and for the assistance that you've given me. You have always shown up, and totally professionally and organized beyond all belief. And your departure is going to leave a big hole in the heart of TRPC and the Regional Planning Council. We'll miss you so much.
Thank you, Carolyn. Anybody else have anything they'd like to share? All right. Thank you, everyone. And congratulations, Vina. We will miss you very much. It's all wonderful to know that you're off having new adventures and spreading all the wonderful gifts that you have to other places and people. But don't be a stranger.
And I just want to say, 23 years of one organization, it's because this organization is fantastic. The policymakers, the board, the policy board, the staff are fantastic. And that's why people stay here. I'm not the only one with longevity in the agency. You see that time and time again. And I know it's going to be in great hands. We came up with a great transition plan. We've had some great, fantastic folks step up into roles new for them. And I just have nothing but the greatest confidence in the agency and of course the community and all the great work you all do.
Great. Well, that's such a lovely way to start the meeting. Okay. We are going to move on to the appointment of the 2023 Work Program Subcommittee. And I forgot to mention before we got right into number 6 that for those who are new, we run a queue for questions at the end of our presentations. We have a couple of just action items, then we're going to have some big presentations where people might have questions. So we run a queue, and I really try and run an equitable queue, meaning that if you have already spoken and someone else who hasn't spoken would like to ask a question or make a reflection, that I might bump them up to the top, but I will make an effort to get everybody who wants to reflect and ask questions into the queue. Okay, so the appointment of our 2023 Work Program Subcommittee. So this is the, I don't know, Vina, do you want to speak about what the Work Program Subcommittee does for a second, and then we'll see who wants to join us?
Sure, yes. So we develop an annual work program, and it just outlines what we're going to work on essentially for the next year. The subcommittee usually meets once to review it. If they have significant questions, they may meet twice. So it's not a huge commitment. And generally the meeting will be after the October TRPC meeting.
All right. Yeah, it's a great way to sort of look at what the full scope and sequence is of the work that the staff are undertaking, and also to understand where the funding is coming from. As someone who's had the privilege of serving for several times, it's really valuable for me to understand sort of just where the buckets are. And I just want to also note that since we called roll, we have had Chris Stearns join us from the PUD, and I see Clark is here as well from the City of Olympia. So I wanted to acknowledge that, and I'll check it off on my attendance list. Okay, so I have offered to serve on the Work Program Subcommittee, and I think ideally we would love to have probably at least 3 other members, right, Vina? Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there anyone who is really interested in serving on the Work Program Subcommittee? I see Helen. Great. Thank you, Helen. Anyone else? We need 2 more people. It's only 1 meeting.
It's not a huge commitment.
It really isn't. We're talking about an hour.
Great way to learn about the agency.
Yeah. Oh, Robin. Great. Thank you, Robin.
When is the meeting?
We will schedule it for everybody's calendars. So once we know who the people are, Berlina will send something out and find a time that works for all of us. So yeah, that's a good question. I'm sorry I didn't mention that at the beginning. It's not a set meeting. The meeting depends on the people. And I see Carolyn.
Yeah.
You're volunteering to serve too, Carolyn? Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Sorry, Robin, did you have another question? You're good. Okay. Anyone else want to serve? Of course, 3 would be the minimum, but if there's another person who would like to serve, we would love to have you. All right, well, it sounds like
This
we
is
have
Don
a good,
Melnick. This is Don Melnick. I failed to talk with Mayor Sullivan before this meeting, but arguably she would be a good member if she has the time. So if you have
okay,
nobody else, I suggest maybe you follow up with her.
okay, why don't we just say Debbie, maybe, and we'll just follow up and see if she'd like to serve. Thanks, Don.
Thanks.
All right, that is a good team. And I think we can move on then to the next item, which is the appointment of the 2023 Legislative Session Subcommittee, and that is Karen. Karen's going to come up and talk a little bit about our process for that. And I don't know what that is. All right. Oh, we'll do that in a little bit then. Karen, go ahead, take it away.
Okay, thank you. So last week we had an invitation to present to the State Government Committee in the Senate. And to me, it sort of said, oh my goodness, we have to quit ignoring the fact that we have a legislative session coming up and we need to start getting ready. And so we've been through a number of iterations of how to best work with our Council and Policy Board and the legislature. And what we've learned that doesn't work is for us to bring, 50 issues in and try and talk to legislators with in the 8 minutes we have with them. And so in the last several years, we have created legislative subcommittee that includes members from the policy board and the council. And the role of that subcommittee is to sift through those issues and find the no more than 5 that we can agree on and that we can bring to our legislators. That doesn't mean that they won't talk to us about other issues. It doesn't mean that we won't have opportunities to bring up specific issues that relate just to your city or town while you are in the room. But we really want to move forward with one voice from the region. We have found ourselves to be very successful. I think I-5 in the last few years is we've done a very good job of with the help of the tribe, with the help of the military community to really bring that issue to the legislature. We also, you may not remember because it's been a long time since the last session, we also received funding to move a little more forward on a high capacity study. And so we're going to be bringing that information to the legislature in December. And so this is really, how do we figure out the issues? And right now I am reaching out to your associations, to cities and counties and fire chiefs and courts and everyone to try and get a handle about the issues that they'll be moving forward. In an election year, often people do not finalize their legislative agenda until after the election, because maybe there are some issues that would play better to some folks than others. And so I'm looking at probably 2 virtual meetings, and we'll figure out what the issues are, and then we will bring them back to the policy board and council. So we are looking for our chair to appoint up to 3 members to serve on that committee.
And do we have, I'm going to move my computer back over. Thanks, Karen. Karen and I are sharing a computer today. Do we have members from last year, Karen, who we know are willing to serve again? Can you remind me who the members were last year?
I'm
Clark?
trying to remember. I know Clark was one of the folks that was up there with us. And now I'm like totally blank. Oh, our former chair came to the meetings, and we just had 2 members last year. We have been asked by the policy board to bump it up to 3. And this doesn't mean that you go to every single meeting up on the Hill. It means that we try and grab a bunch of you when we suddenly have a last minute change in schedule. So it's, the commitment is not that you will attend every.
Okay, so Karen, can I ask another question before we do the appointment? Are there people, well, let me get an answer. Can I ask one more question before we go? Did TPB do they have members who will serve?
Yes.
Okay, so
last year it was Chair Andy Ryder and business representative Renee Radcliffe Sinclair, who works for TBW. She's the executive director there. They have agreed to serve again.
Okay.
And Danny Madrone, who is this first vice chair, will also join the group this year. So we have 3 leadership people at policy board.
okay, and so when we appoint here, are we appointing the entire team, including the TPB representatives? Okay, so we
They'll
just need
appoint
to find a couple of people from TRPC. So Clark, are you willing to serve again? Great. And since JW served last time, I wonder, Mayor DePinto, Joe, are you willing to serve to kind of do a little South County repping for us?
Absolutely.
Great. I wonder, Karen, if it would be a good idea for us also to just find out if there are other members who are willing to kind of be on call. And that helps us develop a little bit of a bench too. So sort of like a work group light. Where's my description? Legislative session subcommittee light.
Yes, that would be
Okay.
great.
So I think for the main one, we've got Clark and Joe who are willing to serve on the main one. Is there anyone who is willing to sort of be on the bench or in the wings for this work?
I would volunteer for that.
Great, Bob, thank you. Anybody else? And Chris?
Yeah.
Great.
I have one other question. Are we going to discuss some of the issues that that you want to cover this fall and dealing with the new session of the legislature, which remains to be determined because elections are up? But because I have one issue that the PUD is important, a line item issue in the capital budget. And it's also important to the county. It's working on a road, Country Club Green Cove Road culvert replacement, which is a fish passage barrier. And I'm sure Amy Hatch Whitaker is well aware of it.
Karen, can you remind us what the process is for how we look at that? Okay.
Basically, we try and bring together, like I said, I'm reaching out to your organizations. We're looking at what came close to passing last session, but maybe didn't. And looking at, are there still some issues around I-5 we need to deal with? Those kinds of things. And then I would bring those to the subcommittee meeting, the first meeting, and we would talk about those issues and we would bring up others. And so this is something that gets talked about at council and at policy board. And so we would just look for those. And then we're looking for those that are, that we can all support. So often it isn't just one, you know, maybe Tumwater has a great transportation project, but maybe we just mentioned that in passing, but it's not one of our 5 big ones. So we're trying to really come together with what are our priority issues. And our legislators really appreciate when we do that, because they don't want to set the priorities for our region. They want us to do that. So often the projects like Chris has talked about, if they don't make it to the big list, it doesn't mean that we can't take 2 minutes in the meeting or a minute or 30 seconds as we're walking them out the door to talk about that issue and say, we're also supportive of this. So we'll be talking about a variety of issues.
Thanks, Karen.
Karen, I appreciate that. And normally the PUD is not involved in transportation or road issues, but in this case we are, because it's a water crossing of our utility and cuts off almost 2/3 of our customers. So we're trying to get, you know, a bridge replacement. It's an expensive thing. But I just want to remind you why this happened, because it's something that's going to occur throughout the county. I've had my staff look at it too. So
Chris, can we finish with taking the volunteers and then
sure,
we have a
no
little time
problem.
at the end? Okay. And I just want to clarify, it's not like the list of legislative priorities will then come back. It's just that the detailed conversation is going to happen with the subcommittee. And then Karen and the subcommittee will come back and say, here's our polished list, right? So we'll still get a chance to look at it even if we're not on the subcommittee. That's okay. Thanks, Karen. Michael, did I see that you were interested in being on the bench? Thank you, Michael.
Yep, thank you.
And of course, Karen, you know I'm on the bench too. Anyone else interested in sort of being on subcommittee life available? Okay. That is good. I think that's good. Yeah. And Chris, did you want to any sort of like sharing you wanted to do for we are good on time. So if you wanted to share a little bit about that and
sure. Well,
benefit of the subcommittee.
The project I'm talking about is north of the golf course, or west of the golf course, northwest of the golf course on Cooper Point. It's a North County project. It's on Green Cove Creek, and Ty Menzer is fully aware of it. It's in his district as it is in mine, since we have the same district. What I'll say is just that you just mentioned earlier how much this county has grown, how as Michael Cade put very concisely, the issues of growth in this county. One of the issues of growth in this county is that since we've been growing for so long, even back to the 60s and 70s, all the infrastructure we put in back then at a different regulatory level is now wearing out. So Green Cove Creek Culvert is an example of this, because this development was built 60s and 70s. And what the public has not put two and two together on is all these delivery vehicles running around our county roads, carrying excessive weights of stuff all the time, has worn down some of these structures that are about to go. And this is an example of one. There are many more. When I counted just PUD affected crossings, there are 5 more in the county that could fall into the same situation. Maybe they were built more recently and haven't collapsed yet. But it is a public works problem that I don't think's been properly addressed, in the sense that we built a lot of stuff all at once, and now we have different fish passage criteria if they're on fish bearing streams, and they're going to be costly to fix now. So hopefully the infrastructure bills that have passed at the federal level, and maybe the state can get wise to it, will properly address some of this. But this is all on county roads, not city, not US highways or state highways. So I just wanted to draw people's attention to that, because we've grown rapidly over these several decades, and these things are starting to wear out. And this is a good example of one of them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That's a good reminder about how important it is for us to not do kind of one-offs, but to really think about the system. So appreciate that reflection. And certainly it does seem like there's some infrastructure money to be spent in this country right now. I want to pause because I was just notified, I think this is for you, Vina, and I didn't realize that. I'm sitting next to me before we move on to the other one. Thank you very much, Karen. So you can't really see this, and it's probably not going to show up very nicely on my screen. Can you guys see that now?
You have your blur turned on.
What was that?
Your background blur is turned on, so it blurs out anything that's not a face.
I know. Let me just tell you, it's a beautiful congratulations certificate. I apologize that I don't have a very good camera to show it, and I apologize, I didn't know this was for your presentation. So Vina, again, thank you very much. I hope you will take this and reflect on your service with pride and joyful memories, even of meetings where the chair screwed up the agenda. Thank you, Vina. All right, that takes us to our next agenda item, which is our new position classification, and that is brought to us by Vina.
Yeah, so this is actually the very last piece of our transition with my departure. So Mark's been talking to you about this for the last 6 months, and there's a lot of details in the staff report, but with Tyson Justice taking over the HR and finance duties of the agency for checks and balances, we need someone to take over some of the financial duties. And then also just looking at some of the things that were on my plate that didn't really go to either Tyson or our new transportation manager, which is Katrina Van Every. We haven't announced that before. She's here as well with us today. We needed someone to take over things like records requests and things like that. So looking at the comparables, the position that could best fit those in was our administrative assistant, but it didn't quite fit in with the responsibilities of that position. So we want to reclassify that to an executive assistant position and put it in the range, the salary range 19. So it's really just reclassifying one position to another, and we would remove the administrative assistant position from our list of positions. So any questions on that? And we are looking for action today on this one.
Great. Does anyone have any questions about the reclassification?
Just a quick question, that this salary change is within the budget?
It is, yes.
Thanks, Rick. Any other questions for Vina? If not, I would entertain a motion to reclassify the administrative assistant position at a salary range of 16 to an executive assistant position at a salary range of 19.
So moved.
Thank you, Robin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the reclassification of the administrative assistant position at salary range 16 to the executive assistant position at salary range 19. Is there any additional discussion? See none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and or raising your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? And any abstentions? Great, the motion passes. And that takes us to, apologies, item number 10, which is the TRPC bylaws and agreement review. And it's Vina again, greatest hits today.
So you all have a set of bylaws and an operating agreement that you function under. And it needs to be updated every 4 years. 2 years ago, we added some language in about remote participation of meetings as we were moving into COVID. It was right when we heard about COVID. You all remember we were told we'd have to go home for 6 weeks and we'd be back to business as normal. And so we wrote in something about remote participation and then said the chair can, we had some very strict requirements around it because we didn't know how it worked, and said the chair may waive them under extenuating circumstances, which we meant to be a pandemic. Well, fast forward 2 years, we're still here. The remote meetings are working well. We just did a poll of you all, and you said you'd like to do hybrid meetings once a quarter, and then remote meetings the other, like every three months you'll do hybrid, and then remote meetings the other 2 months. And so we just rewrote that language in the bylaws to reflect that. The part there that says we will have an in-person access, that's about the Open Public Meetings Act, where we will have a computer set up. So if someone from the public or one of you does want to come into the building, you will have a way to we'll be providing a way to access the meeting, even though it will be held remotely for those remote meetings. It's vague because we don't know how you'll choose to have your meetings in the future. It's just meant to give you a lot more flexibility. So that was the only substantial change to the bylaws. We also did clarify in the assessments that rural county meant the unincorporated areas of the county. It was just so that we had it defined in our bylaws. And then the agreement was actually just cleaning up language. It referred to regional planning councils or Thurston Regional Planning Council a little bit indiscriminately, and I just did a little tidying up. So we are not asking for action on this agenda item today. If you have any further comments or suggestions for the bylaws or agreement, we'll take those and incorporate them. And then we'll be we'll be putting it on consent for action next month's meeting. And then Berlin, I'll send out the agreement for your electronic signatures. So any questions?
Are there any questions? Yeah, Dennis.
I have a couple of comments. First is on page 4, under voting. It's not part of the new updates or changes, but thinking of the growth in the county and particularly in the city of Lacey, I would suggest that it's time to reevaluate the ranked voting and maybe increase theirs. I mean, they've almost caught Olympia. I think that should be looked at again.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's a great point.
great point with the census too, Dennis. We have that data for us right now.
Then the next question is in the agreement there on page 1, down in section 1, creation. I'm wondering why the correction here with council. You have council spelled correctly and capitalized, and then suddenly you do it again in red as if it's another correction. What is the reason for that?
On the first page at the bottom, yeah. So that's just to say that Thurston Regional Planning Council will from now on be referred to as council instead of writing it out as Thurston Regional Planning Council. So it's not a correction, it's an addition. It's just showing up in track changes. So you'll see later, I strike out regional planning and we just refer to it as council. So that's just saying the first time we referred to it.
It just is unclear the way it's stated.
I see how that's a little confusing. It's just meant to be, I can put hereby referred to as council or something.
Yeah.
That's how they do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I just looked at that in one of my contracts.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I see Chris is in the queue. Is anyone else in the queue for questions?
All I have to ask is again about the population changes. When I first came to Thurston County, Tumwater was the population of what Yelm is now. And it's grown a great deal as well, proportionally. So maybe some way of recalibrating the population of our cities and whatnot might be in order, every census that we get data for, for this, which most recent one would be 2020, certainly would be useful as we're a much bigger county at 300,000 nowadays.
Yes, agreed.
And I guess I have a question for you all. Is in my entire time at TRPC, I've never seen a weighted vote. So that's one thing you all could perhaps take that out of the bylaws as well. It simply has never come into action. That's one of the reasons we probably didn't look at those numbers. Maybe something to think about.
Yeah,
I would certainly support that.
I like the idea of like revisiting the voting stuff. I mean, I guess it's good that we haven't had to like use the weighted vote. I guess that means that we're doing a good job dialoguing towards consensus for our community, and it doesn't come down to that. But maybe we could talk about having a subcommittee look into the bylaws and talk about looking at them next year, or do we want to try and do it this year, or like a heavy lift?
I think it would be nice to get the agreement signed and in place, and then perhaps relook at that part of the bylaws.
Does that sound good to everybody? To move forward. I mean, this is just first reading, so we're not making a decision now, but move forward with this, but then come back and look at that the weighted voting piece.
Yeah.
Great. Are there other questions, reflections, comments about the bylaw changes? Let's see any in here. Okay, great. That takes us to, we're actually a little bit ahead of time. We are scheduled to take a break. So why don't we, should we take 10 minutes instead of 5 since we can? So let's take 10 minutes and we'll return at 9:31. And when we return, we will be tackling federal funding call for projects process. Woo. All right, so we'll see you at 9:31. All right. All right, we are back. And we are going to move on to the federal funding call for projects process. And I think this is brought to us from Karen and Paul. So I'm going to hand it off to Karen and Paul. And if you, just a reminder that if you have questions, let's hold questions to the end. And I will keep an eye on the queue. So if you have questions, you can raise your hand as we're going through the presentation or wait till the end, but I will start the queue, calling through the queue at the end of the presentation. Karen and Paul, take us away.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Paul Brewster. I'm leading this presentation, but I do want to acknowledge that Karen and Vina and multiple TRPC staff have been involved with this process. So I'm taking one for the team today to do the presentation and seek your action. And I also just want to acknowledge that Mark Daly really rolled up his sleeves for this process. In fact, he led the discussion for the Transportation Policy Board workshop on July 13th and led that. And I know that this process is important to him, and it's been one of his major goals for our transportation work program. So with that said, this is an important action agenda item for you today. Staff is seeking the council's leadership to close the chapter on the revised process details and put it in motion. And both staff and policymakers have contributed to a foundational process that enables our region to continue funding priority projects in compliance with federal requirements and to adapt the process if needed to overcome challenges as they emerge. The Technical Advisory Committee was involved and committed throughout this journey. They reviewed all the details over numerous meetings and were afforded ample opportunities to offer feedback. And as we shared with you back in July when you last met, we queued up a workshop for the Transportation Policy Board, and for their July meeting, they dug into the details, shared ideas, and they delivered some recommendations to the council that brings this process one step closer to completion. And I want to note that from August 1st through the 14th, staff published the process details for public comment, and no comments were received. So my presentation today is going to focus on the TPB's recommendations and highlight some other major elements. The staff report and its attachment include the details that will comprise your action today. So we're asked, why are we asking for your action now? You last met in July. The TPB held its workshop, and TRPC typically issues a call for projects every 2 years, and the last process we conducted was in 2020. So we're due for a process this year, and with that window closing, the time to act is now. Also because all of you as members of the council and our Transportation Policy Board representatives have been involved and are familiar with the process update, you're in the best position to implement our first call for projects with the revised criteria before the end of the year. So today, we're seeking 2 actions from you. The first is to approve TRPC's revised call for projects. We're referring to this in its official title as our Metropolitan Planning Federal Transportation Grant Program Call for Projects process. I want to be clear, this is TRPC's discretionary federal highways allocation that you as the council have discretion to make priority projects, as opposed to, say, the new bipartisan infrastructure law grant opportunities that are coming out. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background and overview of the process, touch on the TPB recommendations, and then I'm going to pause for your discussion and action before we move on to your second action item, which will be to approve a fall 2022 call for projects to implement this revised process to request applications for project selection for funding in federal fiscal years 25, 26, and 27. And as part of that presentation, I'll just give you an overview of the estimated funding levels we are going to award, eligible applicants, process details to include the schedule, and then again, I will pause for your discussion and action, and then that will conclude my presentation. So a quick recap on the objectives. It's important to reintroduce you to these. One, we want to provide a direct tie between our project selection process and our region's performance goals and targets. We want to make sure that our applicants understand that they have a fair and competitive process and evaluation criteria by which their projects will be evaluated for meeting the region's priorities. We want to improve the region's ability to meet annual obligation targets and improve opportunities to leverage additional funding. And in fact, the Thurston County region has succeeded in meeting our annual obligation targets since 2020, and local agency projects have received an additional $4.5 million above our allocation as a result of these collective efforts aligned with these last two objectives. So what are the things we can't change? We can't change how we program projects by required geographic splits, and I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. And we can't change the types of projects that are eligible for these federal grant programs that are set by FHWA and encoded in federal law. We also have some regional funding practices that we didn't want to change because they work well, such as issuing a call for projects every 2 years, programming at least 2 to 3 years worth of projects into the future in each grant cycle, and giving you the prerogative to identify funding set-asides at the beginning of each call for a projects process. And lastly, we think it's important to maintain this list of contingency projects for additional funding. So I'm going to reference the geographic areas throughout this presentation, so I just want to introduce you to this map of the census geographic areas. The north central cities and the urban growth areas are in the urban medium area shown in white, most of unincorporated Thurston County, in addition to Bucota, Rainier, Tenino, and a portion of Yelm, as well as portions of the tribes, are in the rural area, which is that Forest Service green color. And lastly, a portion of Yelm, Grand Mountain, Rochester area, and the Clear Lakes area are shown in dark green. That's our urban small category. And these are new geographic areas to us, introduced to us this year. So our 2022 required splits are shown in this table here. So as you can see, the majority of surface transportation block grant, or STBG, goes to the urban medium area, about 69%. Transportation alternative funding splits are also shown. And this table here shows how the 2022 estimated available funding plays out with these required geographic splits. So these geographic splits and their funding levels influence our region's funding caps for proposals in the urban medium area and the maximum awards for urban small and rural areas, which I will touch on later. There are 3 main areas we developed for our revised process. I'm going to cover all 3 and then again pause for your action. In general, there's overall agreement on the 6 regional funding priorities. There's also agreement on the evaluation criteria. The TPB approved a recommendation specifically to the Sustainable Thurston Urban Corridors and Centers criteria, which I'll go into a little bit more detail. And the TPB also approved a funding cap that I'll also cover for you. So just touching regional funding priorities are the types of projects that TRPC prioritizes for funding. Safety, maintenance, and efficiency have been mainstay funding priorities for nearly 3 decades. And for this process, we've added active transportation planning projects and projects that improve the resiliency and strengthen our system from natural hazards and technological disruptions. So we briefed you on these funding priorities earlier this year. They're documented in your staff report. I'm just gonna leave it at that. TRPC identified 4 point-based evaluation criteria for ranking how effectively proposals will support regional transportation priorities. These evaluation criteria were presented to you earlier this year. It's noteworthy to mention that TRPC conducted extensive community outreach last year through a transportation priority survey to help inform our equity criteria. So of these 4 criteria, they're each worth 2 points that could be credited to how well these proposals meet the criteria. There's 8 points total for proposals in the urban medium area and 6 points total for proposals in the urban small and rural areas. So only urban medium area proposals will be ranked against each other, and the same, only urban small and rural proposals will be ranked with proposals from similar geographic areas. So the TPB really dug into the sustainable Thurston corridors and centers criteria at their workshop and have a recommendation. Before I kind of talk about the recommendation, I just want to revisit this criteria. The purpose is to really increase the number of trips made by walking, bicycling, using transit in our urban core areas. And this criteria is based on 2 factors. The first being the type of projects that's shown on this slide. And the second is the location on a designated urban corridor and center. Sustainable Thurston set a priority goal that by 2035, 72% of all households in our cities, towns, and unincorporated growth areas within a half mile of an urban center, a corridor, or neighborhood center. So that's what we're striving for with this criteria. Here's the map of this urban corridors and centers. It's based on the zoning and comprehensive land use plan land use designations as recommended by land use planners. And the TAC members agree that this criteria is a really useful policy framework to evaluate the project's performance in meeting the sustainable Thurston goal. They also agree that the criteria should only apply to projects located within the urban medium area. But there was a significant amount of disagreement as to what should define a neighborhood center to obtain credit for this criteria's points, and that's what the policy board focused on at their workshop. So there were 2 camps of thoughts on how neighborhood centers and eligible points should be determined. The first was, and this was the original staff recommendation, was to use the map, to use existing zoning and comprehensive plan land use designations, and points should be based solely on a project's location on a map. But there was disagreement in that there are existing neighborhood centers or areas in the community that function as such and would benefit from community transportation investments to improve walking, biking, and transit in these areas. So it shouldn't be just excluded to the map. So points should not only be based on what's shown on the map, but how applicants could justify how other areas function as centers based on those existing uses. And that second item is what the TPB recommends the council approve for the call for projects, and staff concurs. So the TPB recommends the application process allow applicants to use a map, as well as provide an option to provide a narrative on the application to justify other unmapped areas. So the third and final issue to cover in a revised process is the funding caps. So funding caps are meant as a guardrail to ensure that one or more competitive applicants aren't awarded most of the funding, that we really want to have some sort of fair and equitable distribution of funds for priorities across the region, but also funding caps are important to make sure that TRPC continues to meet its obligation targets. So staff originally proposed implementing 2 funding caps, the first being a funding cap specific to a single funding cycle, such as say 2022, and we called this a micro cap. Staff also proposed a multi-year funding cap covering 3 consecutive funding cycles, such as for 2022, 2024, and 2026. So there was general agreement that funding caps support geographic equity and reduces the wait time of each member to receive a funded projects. But several jurisdictions were not in favor of the microcap as it limited the ability to submit priority proposals for larger projects. So the Transportation Policy Board really focused in on the multi-year funding cap, that they deliberated on this and thought that this should be the basis for the total amount of revenue that applicants should be eligible for award. So more specifically, the TPB is recommending that the council implement a funding cap that exclusively applies to proposals to be implemented within the urban medium area with both surface transportation block grant and transportation alternatives grant program funding. Specifically, the cap stipulates that no one applicant can receive more than 33% of the estimated combined funding available for the first 2 funding cycles over 3 consecutive calls for projects. So looking at that table below, what we're saying is if we take our estimated available funding for both 2022 and 2024, that combined amount, take 33% of that for both STBG and the transportation alternatives, that would be the total amount of funding that an applicant could receive as an award all the way out through 2026. So conceivably, the applicant could achieve that funding cap. They could reach that funding cap in 2022, 2024, or 2026. However, this funding cap would then be evaluated in 2024 based on what our allocation is going to be and what we estimate for available funding. And that funding cap would be reset in the 4th call for projects. So by the time 2028 rolls around, all the partners' funding caps would be reset and start with a fresh slate. So the TPB's recommendation for funding caps only concerns the urban medium area. So how about the urban small and rural areas? Staff are proposing that the maximum grant award should be based on the maximum estimated funding for each STBG and transportation alternative programs. So the first table shows the funding for the maximum STBG award for urban, small, rural, and combined small and rural areas. We offer a combined option because Yelm, for example, city limits includes both small urban as well as rural. And there are portions of Thurston County where a project could traverse both urban, small, and rural areas. So the second table is the maximum possible award for transportation alternatives. And so we would be applying these funding caps in 2022, but the plan would be that carrying forward with our call for projects into future years, this would be the policy basis for our maximums and funding caps. Okay, so what we're seeking for you is action on our revised call for projects process. This is as presented in your September 2nd staff report and its accompanying attachment, and based on what I've presented to you for funding priorities, the regional evaluation criteria with the Transportation Policy Board's recommendation for sustainable Thurston, and funding caps, including the TPB's recommendation for the urban medium area multi-year funding cap. So with that, I'll pause for any questions and your discussion, and we're looking for your action on this. And I will stop sharing for the moment.
Thank you very much, Paul. So just to be clear, we're now having questions and discussions about the first action item, which is the revised call for projects rules, right? Okay, just making sure everybody's on page. Okay, Robin, go ahead, and I'll be keeping watching the queue.
Sure. Paul, when you talked about the 2 different ways to identify what a neighborhood center is, can you give examples of when what's on the map or the zoning criteria in a particular place might not make a thing look like a neighborhood center, but that the people from that jurisdiction might argue that it functions as a neighborhood center or could with investment?
You want me to give an example of an area? Is that what you're asking for?
Sure, or a zoning type that might not be what we traditionally would consider a neighborhood center.
Sure. So one example that was raised was in the city of Tumwater at Old Highway 99 and 79th Avenue, where the Spuds grocery store is located. There's a fairly dense residential subdivisions around that area that people do walk to and visit. Plus, there's that warehouse district that has breweries and 8 Arms Bakery that's also visited by neighbors. It's currently zoned light industrial, but Tumwater is planning to revisit the zoning on that. But Tumwater has been interested in pursuing investments around that intersection with a roundabout plus other improvements. And so they think it's important that they have the opportunity, knowing that they're looking at redesignating that area as a neighborhood center, to be eligible to apply for that now.
That helps. Thank you. We've been having a conversation in Lacey about our neighborhood commercial zoning definitions. And so this may come into play for us as well.
Thank you, Robin. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning and thank you. I think has been discussed before, the county's concern still remains that the criteria that was developed does not address the system preservation, which is then not in alignment with the #1 goal in the strategic plan, which is to maintain and preserve current infrastructure. And further, it doesn't align with the bipartisan infrastructure bill's emphasis on preservation either. So certainly going forward when it comes time for the vote on behalf of the county, we'll be abstaining just in an effort to allow the process to move forward though.
Thanks, Scott. Chris, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to know, we're a utility that operates mainly in the rural areas of our county, about 8,000 or 9,000 customers, 3 times more people served. And what I have been concerned about, or have addressed before the council before, is my concern about Lamerids and how they're operated. I was wondering, you planners, how are you dealing with Lamerids? I know Rochester is getting sidewalks, for example, and there are other programs out there that help Lamerids own up to their designation as a town or unincorporated place. Little Rock comes to mind, Boston Harbor, even one out in Steamboat Island, which is a very busy business center there. What are you doing to assist them? Because I don't see any of these designations at all in the county, and I'm wondering where the county plays a part in this.
I guess I'll say our sustainable thirsting criteria only applies to that urban medium area in the North County area. The county,
inside the UGM, you're saying?
Inside the urban growth area for cities of Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater. So the county could choose to apply for funding to address bicycle pedestrian improvements out in unincorporated areas, and there's funding opportunities to do so. They would not be scored against the urban medium projects. They would only be scored against other rural and urban small proposals. So that's how we're addressing that.
Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Paul. Are there any other questions? I have one, but I want to see if there's anyone else who has a question. Anyone in here? So Paul, quick question on the funding caps. Can you speak to how the funding cap proposal would impact, or maybe it wouldn't impact, that other list of contingency projects, kind of the backups that we keep in the queue for, like, oh, look, here's $2 million extra someone else couldn't spend. How would that, how would those things interact with each other?
Yeah, good question. Thanks for bringing that up. So the funding cap would not be affected by projects that we pull from the contingency list should additional funding become available. So in other words, if there's a funding opportunity where we get additional obligation authority or redistributed or sanctioned funds, the award of those funds to advance that particular project would not count towards the applicant's funding cap. Those are sort of measures that are beyond our control in a call for project cycle, and they're often based on filling a need as the opportunities arise so that we don't miss the opportunity.
Okay, thank you for addressing that. I appreciate it. Are there any other questions? Oh, Scott, hi, go ahead. Oh, I think you might be muted. You are still muted, Scott.
He's working on it, I think.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
Looks like he's looking for the button.
Let me ask. Can someone ask Scott to unmute?
There, can
Oh,
you hear
there
me
you
now?
go. Yes, we can. Thanks,
Oh,
Scott.
wonderful. Sorry about that. Too many windows open on a very small screen. I should add that, you know, the primary concern the county has is really stemmed on our concern that county projects going forward will not be competitive in some of these, or using some of these ranking criteria. You know, when you look at, say, the criteria number 2, which is the sustainable thirst in the urban corridors, from our review, most county projects would likely receive no points for some of those areas. And when we look at the greenhouse gas emissions too, so in addition to the not addressing preservation, we're concerned our projects won't get very many, perhaps 0 or 1 point for some of these. So I guess, you know, in addition to not being aligned with the goal of the strategic plan, you know, certainly from the county's perspective, our concern is that our projects will not rank well at all. So I just wanted to make that emphasis. I'll see if I can unmute now.
Thank you, Scott.
And I'll just add, one of the examples we used with the policy board at the workshop was the Marvin Road improvement, Marvin Corridor Improvement Project that traversed between 2 designated neighborhood centers, and our revised process to allow the county to make the case for that project does benefit the county. So we tried to be accommodating, but staff also recognized that the importance of funding caps to provide some equity to help the county. So at some point in our 3 consecutive funding cycles, be positioned for project funding.
Thank you, Paul. John.
Yeah, I just wanted to really quick, I'm on the Transportation Policy Board as well. We had very lively discussion on all of these things and the questions that you guys are asking. There were some things that I wasn't very happy with, but overall, when you look at what we're supposed to be looking at, which is Thurston County as a whole, not the individual parts, I think this will serve us in the long run and semi-short run very well. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, John. I appreciate your reflections as a TPB member. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add in about the Green Cove system there. This is a high priority watershed, not only of Olympia, I think Vina remembers this, but also of the county's urban growth management area that then drains north outside of both. And it's the lowest blockage on that fish-bearing stream. And this has always been a high priority for preservation, both by the county and the city of Olympia for many years now, of all its watersheds, because it's the most intact stream as far as fish going. And I think some of you remember I did fish passage work for Fish and Wildlife. Maybe the newer members don't know that about my background, but I used to work for the SHIAP program, which involves salmon steelhead habitat inventory assessment, which meant I look at culverts and see whether they provide fish passage or not. So I'm just letting you know the background of that, because it may not be obvious to people, and even Olympia city councilors, many of them not been around that long to remember the ranking of watersheds inside their own city. Thank you. Thanks,
Chris. Thanks for reminding us how that environment is sort of connected to sometimes all of the pieces.
Yeah, it's weird that it goes from inside an urban area out. You know, usually it's the other way around.
Yeah.
so it comes from a wetland that dominates the west side there and the Capitol Mall area.
Yeah. If there's no other questions, I think we are looking for action. So I'm looking to see if there are any other questions, and otherwise I would entertain a motion that we
So
approve.
entertained.
I'm going to read it out because I think we need to read it out. Yes. That we approve the revised TRPC Metropolitan Planning Federal Transportation Grant Program Call for Projects process as outlined in the attachment. TRPC Metropolitan Planning Federal Transportation Grant Program Call for Projects process. And it sounds like, John, you would like to make that motion.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a second?
Don Melnick goes second.
Thank you, Don. Is there any further discussion? Looking at the queue, I don't see any. None in the room. Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the motion as stated, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Or both.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And are there any abstentions?
Thurston County.
Thank you. The motion passes, and I believe that takes us to the second part of this presentation and action, correct, Paul?
It is, so I'll resume. So now we're going to talk about how we implement this revised process this fall. So TRPC will program nearly 11.4 million combined in total STBG and transportation alternatives funding for federal fiscal years 25, 26, and 27. Due to the uncertainty of TRPC's future funding levels for congestion mitigation and air quality improvement program funding, we will not be programming for this grant in the 2022 call for projects process. So there's the funding levels for you. So while the Transportation Policy Board didn't identify a specific set aside for the 2022 call for projects, they did provide a recommendation on funding eligibility for the Rural Community Support Program. Needless to say, this program is supported by both the policy board and council alike. So staff is recommending the council set aside $600,000 in flexible STBG revenue to fund a separate call for projects in early 2023 for the Rural Community Support Program. Staff will be presenting details about this call for projects to you next year for your approval. So eligible applicants for this program include Bucota, Rainier, Tenino, Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation, and the Nisqually Indian Reservation. And Thurston County staff has expressed continued support for administering this program. The TPB's recommendation in regards to the 2022 call for projects is that Rural Community Support Program applicants will apply for and receive a federal grant through TRPC's federal transportation call for projects this fall, and are awarded funding would be ineligible for an award through the Rural Community Support Program call for projects early next year. So we do have some limits on application submissions, but they're very generous limits. So applicants can submit up to 4 proposals. That's both STBG and transportation alternatives combined for each geographic area. And while there's 3 geographic areas, we're considering that there's 4 application areas because of the combined urban, small, and rural areas where projects could traverse. For joint applications, lead applicants or partners may not submit more than 3 proposals, but applicants can submit proposals directly to the contingency list, and there's no limits on the number of contingency proposals except for the fatigue that will come from applicants filling out the forms. Funding caps will be in effect. That multi-year 33% funding cap will apply in 2022 and will carry through for the 2024 and 2026 applicants awarded funding proposals in the urban medium area. And the urban small maximum awards, urban small and rural maximum awards would also be in effect for the 2022 process. So we have 2 types of eligible applicants, what we've always called our traditional partners. These are the local agencies that provide surface transportation facilities, programs, and services as part of their core mission. This includes cities, the county, and the tribes. And then we have non-traditional partners. Of course, TRPC fits in this category as an MPO for doing planning projects, but our Transportation Alternatives Grant Program, as specified by federal law, enables a number and variety of applicants to apply. And so these are agencies or organizations that provide either surface transportation facilities like the port, programs or services to the general public. I just want to make sure that I wasn't remiss in saying intercity transit is considered a traditional partner as well. So non-traditional partners could be school districts, state and federal natural resource agencies, and nonprofit organizations. But the important issue is that non-traditional partners require and secure a traditional partner to serve as a sponsor to oversee compliance with state and federal grant administration requirements known as a certification acceptance approval with Washington Department of Transportation. And because this is a new process and there's a little uncertainty about how it's going to work out and the awards are going to play out, the policy board did not make any formal set aside for non-traditional partners. So they will be competing with traditional applicants for the same pots. Overall schedule, today with your action, we would launch the call for projects process. So applications would be accepted starting early next week through 5 p.m. Friday, October 7th. We'll brief the policy board on the update and your action on the 14th. When the applications are in, staff will take a first stab at the review, scoring the proposals, validating completeness of the application forms. And then on October 20th, the Technical Advisory Committee will perform a peer technical review of applications for their scope of work. If there's any potential issues, is the amount of money that's requested sufficient for the scope of work, any right-of-way challenges, et cetera. We will again have a public comment period on proposals to gather those comments to share with the policymakers, first to the council for November 4th for your preview of the applications and proposals that we receive. On November 13th, the policy board will review those proposals and forward you a funding recommendation for your action on your final meeting of 2022 on December 2nd. Award letters would then follow later in December. And we would then amend these projects into the updated Regional Transportation Improvement Program, which is a segue for your next presentation. And then lastly, staff, we're ready to flip the switch. We have application materials and process guidance ready to go. We briefed the TAC yesterday on the call for projects. They previewed the application forms. No new issues were raised or identified. They're excited, just like school students are to get back to school. They're ready to fill out some application forms with the fresh forms. TRPC staff will provide application support up to that October 7th submission deadline. And then if there are any, say, minor revisions following the technical review, staff will allow applicants to make those minor revisions before they go to the policy board for consideration. So I'll pause here. We're now looking for your action to approve TRPC's fall 2022 call for projects to implement the revised process to request applications for project selection for funding in years 2025 through 2027, as presented in the second half of your September 2nd staff report.
Thank you very much, Paul. Let's start the queue here. So Robin, why don't you go ahead?
Just a brief question about the Transportation Board's recommendation that folks who received funding in 2022 for the Rural Community Support Program, not be eligible to apply in 2023. Has there ever been an instance where we have few applicants, in which case perhaps it might make sense to allow someone who received funding last year to apply again? Like, if I don't think that that's realistic, we probably always have too many requests and not enough money, but would it be an option to allow folks who'd received it last year to receive it again if we had leftover funds and not as many projects in the queue?
Conceivably, yes. I think with the TPB recommendation and a council approval, it's your prerogative as policymakers to make those exceptions. And, it's possible that the Rural Community Support Program applicants could apply and not receive funding. So then, of course, we would invite them to apply for the Rural Community Support Program.
Thank you, Robin and Paul. I see a question from Chris.
Just a brief one for staff. I was just wondering where stormwater fits in. Maybe it's under a different pot, but stormwater, of course, interacts with the use of many facilities that are represented around this table, whether it be the port, lot, or just our transportation corridors, which get messed up periodically in its lowest points. With sea level rise, cities have been considering that. I'm sure the Nisqually Bridge is affected by that. There are a lot of projects that are impacted by storm surge, which is part of stormwater. And in my long history in this county, I've seen a lot of damages done, and we have more paved surfaces this day and age, more crossings to protect, and just wondering where the stormwater program is with the county and cities as far as improving that infrastructure. Thank you very much.
So I can't answer that latter part of your question about where the communities are. I will say that STBG funds, stormwater projects associated with transportation are eligible activities. The resiliency funding priority certainly comes into play because if stormwater facilities are undersized for potential excessive flows, that would certainly be something to be considered. However, our criteria doesn't really put emphasis on those types of projects unless they're located within the other benefits of the other priorities. I would also say that transportation alternatives funding is an eligible pot, especially around habitat enhancement.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks,
I
Chris.
just bring up that subject because, for example, whenever the county gets around to replacing stormwater, even in Tanglewild, which is a county area inside of Lacey, we have a water system there that we're going to be replacing our mains. We'd like to coordinate better with the county to do that. And so stormwater plays a part even in what we do to replace our infrastructure. Hopefully we can dig up the road at the same time. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Paul. Are there any other questions? If not, then I would entertain a motion.
So entertained.
Read it. Let me read it again. To approve TRPC's fall 2022 call for projects to implement the revised process to request applications for project selection for funding in years 2025 to 2027. Sounds like John has moved. Yes, John?
Yes.
All right. Any second?
Second.
Thank you, Robin. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the call for projects as stated. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, everyone in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye and or raising your hand.
Aye.
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 Anyone against? And any abstentions? Great. The motion passes and the call for projects is on. Get those packets out, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for a really thorough presentation. And thanks to everyone who worked really hard on the dialogue that got us to this place. It feels really good to be having these substantive conversations for the benefit of our community and continuously be looking for ways to improve our process. That brings us to item 13, which is the draft regional transportation improvement plan, RTIP with Theresa. Right? Is that who's doing it? Great.
Good morning. Let me share my screen here. And here we go. So yes, I'm fortuitous. Just after people receive funding, the next stop for their federal funds is the RTIP. So good morning. My name is Theresa Julius. I'm a planner and transportation modeler here at TRPC. I'm here today to give you an overview of the draft 2023-2026 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or the RTIP. You will have a chance to review the draft before you're considering of adoption next month. There we go. The RTIP is an annual process as a new 4-year period rolls forward each year. The RTIP is derived from local jurisdictional 6-year transportation improvement programs, or TIPs, and Intercity Transit's TIP, or POP. That's their program of projects. Most important, the RTIP identifies a list of transportation projects that will go to the state to be included in the State Transportation Improvement Program, the STIP. The purpose of the RTIP, and this is important because it bears repeating, the RTIP identifies transportation projects that are going to be forwarded to the state for inclusion in the STIP. These are the RTIP projects, and they're tables 1 and 2 of the document, and table 1 was included in your meeting packet. The RTIP demonstrates financial constraint for those RTIP projects, and that's table 3 of the document. It demonstrates consistency with the Growth Management Act, which requires transportation planning to be coordinated and consistent with local comprehensive plans. It's consistent with the Regional Transportation Plan. Additionally, Appendix A identifies other programmed and planned transportation projects in local TIPs and IT's TIP POP. When these projects receive federal funding, they might be eligible for an expedited amendment process for inclusion in the STIP, getting money to the local projects more quickly. So what are the RTIP projects? These are projects awarded federal funding by TRPC, which Paul was just talking about. Projects awarded federal funding through state or federal sources, Washington State DOT projects, and regionally significant projects, regardless of their funding source. So including these projects in the RTIP for submission for the STIP is important, as the money is not released until the projects have been approved in the STIP. So how does this RTIP project list come together? The RTIP is part of a series of transportation improvement programs developed over many years to accomplish long-range planning efforts by local jurisdictions and intercity transit. So here's a snapshot of how various local and regional plans come together to create the RTIP and then finally move to the STIP. So transportation projects have been identified and vetted in local planning processes such as comprehensive and long-range plans, capital facilities plans, IT strategic plan, the regional transportation plan that's adopted by TRPC. And this is obviously not an exclusive list of the planning that goes on in the region, just kind of a little snapshot here. The long-range projects, once they get developed, move into the 6-year transportation improvement plans, the TIPs, and IT's TIP POP. These are what gets included in our RTIP. So after years of planning, the exciting piece is when you get your project secured funding. So you got your application in, you got your money. So for RTIP projects, funding is not released until the project has been approved in the STIP, and the RTIP is the last stop before reaching the STIP. So agencies applied for and received funding for priority transportation projects included projects funded by TRPC. That's the Surface Transportation Block Grant, the Transportation Alternatives, and right now we still have some congestion mitigation, air quality improvement money still waiting to be secured through the STIP. Planning for the annual update of the RTIP has been going on since spring for many jurisdictions and intercity transit, and sometimes even longer than that. So development starts with local tips and is fulfilled with the approval of the STIP by the Federal Highways in January of next year. Appendix A includes projects from local tips that do not meet the criteria for an RTIP project. These are projects that are funded with local or state monies, or they're land projects. Relatively few projects meet the criteria to be an RTIP project. This year, we have 25 projects in the RTIP moving forward to the STIP to have funding released, and 122 projects in Appendix A. Including Appendix A projects provides an overview of transportation projects in the region. Additionally, it allows for a streamlined amendment process as planned projects receive funding, getting money to the projects more quickly. Currently, the RTIP is out for public review, which is part of a series of review these projects have undergone. Public notice for the draft RTIP runs through September 14th, and our outreach strategy includes notice in the Olympian. Notice is posted on our website. Emails are being sent to our regional partners and contact lists. Facebook posts and targeted boosts are going to be carried out to increase public awareness. The Transportation Policy Board will be reviewing the document at their September 14th meeting. All public comments and the recommendation from the Transportation Policy Board will be provided to you in the staff report for your October meeting. So the draft RTIP, again, is available online at the link in your staff report. At the October meeting, you'll consider adoption of the RTIP. Thank you. Do you have any questions? I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Theresa. Are there any questions for Theresa about the RTIP? We are not taking action today. We will potentially take action in October. Any questions? All right. No questions at all? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Theresa. We will see you in October. That takes us to item 14, which is reports from outside committees. And we have Helen here to share with us about what's happening at the Puget Sound Regional Council.
All right, thank you, Hillary. Yeah, well, pretty much what's happening here, a lot of comprehensive plan review again. They have the PSRC has put up a kind of a new revised website with they've really been trying to make their data very public friendly. So they have a data portal that is worth checking out for sure. In their, they talked a bit about the Governor's Smart Community Awards, which is a good place to look for exemplary planning and policy. Like Seattle, for example, got an award for an affordable housing project that sounded like it would be pretty interesting to Olympia. Renton got one for a sub-area plan that was exemplary, and Lakewood got one for its energy and climate change chapter in its comprehensive plan revision. So they just, that's kind of an interesting place to look for what other communities are doing. The Governor's Smart Communities Awards, they have a website. In terms of workshops, they have this, what do they call it? They're doing these series of workshops for comprehensive plan revision. And they just did one that TRPC was involved in on climate change policy. The next one is in September 7th, and it's going to be on economic development. So that is a workshop that's available for people to sign up for. The next Growth Management Policy Board meeting is going to be another deep dive into housing policy, and they are continuing to work on a tool that would be of interest to cities, I think, on how to best match housing typologies with the kinds of needs that are going to emerge out of the studies from implementing HB 1220. So that's something to look for. The main discussion continued to be the comp plan updates. They have 86 of them to deal with. So they're trying to do a really good job up front. In terms of transportation, they're putting a fair bit of thinking energy into opening up opportunities that address equity, and they have a new equity set aside fund for transportation, which I assume is sort of like dealing with those non-traditional partners that Paul brought up earlier in his presentation, and safety being another one of the kind of new areas to be putting more emphasis on in transportation. They also just mentioned the fact that the process for looking for new airports moving ahead. And of course, Thurston County's got 2 locations on the list for that. And then I'm always listening for discussion about the environment, but it seems like in terms of transportation funding and project money, the emphasis still seems to be on these urban stormwater parks that they've been developing up north of us. That's been their way of dealing with the aging infrastructure problem that Chris was talking about. And then they had I think you might be interested in, and I put a link to in my written report that's going to be coming to you with the meeting summary. They did a slideshow on regional trends, and just some of the highlights of that are that population growth is pretty much on track with what's been predicted at a regional rate of about 50,000 new people a year. The big cities are still taking the bulk of that, especially Seattle, still taking about 40% of the new people. Also Redmond, Bellevue, and Tacoma and the Sammamish area are taking the lion's share. They are meeting their criteria, the requirements for those people locating near high capacity transit, but they'd really like to get that up to about 2/3 of new people moving into within a half mile of high capacity transit. Ridership on transit remains low. So that's a familiar story post-COVID, but it's slowly coming up. And then jobs wise, one of the slides it was quite detailed about which sectors are growing and which are not. And IT and professional services, of course, are booming along, and then hospitality and manufacturing are struggling. And that's about it. I mean, like I said, there will be a kind of a more detailed report with a lot of links coming to you with the after meeting summary. And that's it.
Thank you, Helen. And Helen has offered to prepare a written summary for members to kind of dig into. So deep appreciation for that. There's so much good learning that's happening from other parts of the state. And it's really, it's cool to have someone at the table to bring that learning back to us. So thank you, Helen, for that work. That takes us to the executive director's report.
Sure. So we talked a little bit about your meetings. And so just as a reminder, Berlina did a poll. And what you've asked us to do is have in-person hybrid meetings. And so those will be held in March, June, September, and December. And then the other meetings will be remote only. And Berlina will get that in the after meeting summary. So you'll have that at your fingertips. Also be clear on the agenda. A couple other announcements. We are recruiting for the Thurston Climate Advisory Work Group community members. So if you know of any community members, there's 2 open slots on that work group. They will serve as a community voice to advise policymakers carrying out climate action throughout the Thurston region. The group will meet 4 to 6 times annually, and members can be compensated at $50 a meeting. No experience is required. And they're looking for folks from communities disproportionately affected by climate change, including people of color, people with disabilities, and people of low income. And if you just go to our website, you can find an application form there. So if you know of anyone, pass the word along. We'll also get this in our after meeting summary, so you can pass the word along to folks you know. As part of our backfilling Katrina Van Every's promotion to transportation manager, we are currently recruiting for an associate or a senior planner. And so if you also know of anyone who is excited to work in a really great place, please get the word out. That's also on our website. Okay, so Karen mentioned the week without driving, I think at your last meeting, and that is now coming up. That's going to be September 19th to 25th. This is an event that's sponsored by the Disability Rights Washington organization. And really, so the question is, how does this work? What does this mean with a week without driving? So what they're saying is, if you choose to participate, you can get around however you want, but don't drive yourself in your vehicle. So for any of your activities, try to get around without driving yourself, not just your work commute. If you normally transport others, it applies to those trips too. You can ask someone else to drive you, but keep track of how much you owe this person in their time. And if you feel obligated to support them in other ways, in other words, do you have to take their kids to school or something? And so, and then you can use ride hail or taxis, but just keep a note of how much it costs you. They're trying to bring a greater awareness of how much driving is costing. And so there's a lot more information about this. We'll also get this out in the after meeting summary, and because it's coming up, we've got a couple more weeks there. And then finally, to support the week without driving, our staff have put together a event taking place on September 21st, which is the Wednesday of that week, in kind of morning over lunch. And it's Take the Bus on Martin Way activity. And they're going to have 2 sites where folks will meet, either in Olympia or Lacey, and take transit and have lunch. And it's just going to be a fun event to get to see the corridor. So Allison Osterberg and Veronica Jarvis are the staff who are coordinating this. They have sent out an email to all of you, and we encourage members of council, the policy board, your staff, our staff to all take part of this and just get some flavor of what exciting planning is going on along the Martin Way corridor. We've had a great project going on there for a couple of years, as well as participate in taking the bus down the 670 corridor. Okay, that's all I've got.
Thank you, Vina. That takes us to member check-in. This is a time for you to share things that might be happening from your jurisdiction that you think others might like to know about. And also a time for you to share if there's something particularly meaningful from today's meeting that you're excited to bring back to your jurisdiction. So you can use the raise hand feature and just to let us know, and we will start with Robin.
Vina, I'm hoping to participate in the week without driving. I signed up to participate. What is the date of the event that Allison and Veronica are hosting?
Wednesday, September 21st.
21st. Okay. Thank you.
And I see Chris. Hey, Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. Just wanted to indicate that we finished a process. I believe earlier in the year, I told you folks about us reviewing broadband county services, and of that, we have gone through an earlier iteration with the cities, which didn't get any partners to go ahead with. So when we examined doing the county and looking at specifically at the school districts, we prodded the county to form a broadband action team, which resulted in better coordination for the whole of Thurston County regarding its current providers like Comcast and others that operate in the South County as well, including Tenine Hotel and others, to better coordinate what services there are, especially to schools and other facilities, whether it be emergency 911, medical, you name it, where broadband really is utilized extensively. Anyway, the report is just that we chose, when we saw that the Nisquallies partnered up with Astound Communications, used to be different name, now it's called Astound. they're now putting in a system from the Nisqually tribe through the county out to Oakville area and Rochester, where the Chehalis tribe is, and providing services from that trunk line. And they've gotten grants up to about $6 million to do that. We didn't want to compete or, you know, in any way interrupt that private-public partnership at this time. So we're watching that go ahead and seeing more services be provided in the rural area of our county, which is what our first objective was. And getting that broadband action team going hopefully will produce fruit in other parts of the county that are slowly getting services from the fringe, like from Mason County out Steamboat Island and other places. So I just wanted to report back on where that's at and that we chose to step back at this time. But of course, at any time we could change our minds about that, as many utilities in Washington State PUDs do involve themselves in broadband services and are connected through NOAANET to the BPA lines that run through our county. So the presence of that is always there to operate. What we were trying to produce was something that was an open system that any ISP, even the smaller ones that work in our county, could provide a menu of services so it isn't monopolized. But at least I believe the Nisquallies are getting a lot of employment out of this, and that's a good thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Carolyn.
Hi, I just wanted to let you know we're having a kind of a long rollout changing of the guard at Lot. Many of you may know that longtime director Michael Stroop is retiring. He will be leaving late November, somewhere between there and mid-December. Assistant Executive Director Matt Cannelli has been chosen to succeed Michael. And he, through a very long and comprehensive continuity process and leadership, he has been working closely with Mike and will be gradually taking over and then fully assume authority in December there. But part of the reason I call this to your attention is that of any agency I've been associated with, I think Lot has the most well thought out succession process that I've ever seen. And I would invite all of you to take a look at how they do that, because I think a number of our agencies are dealing with aging workforce, challenges with hiring people, and to have a wonderful program like that in place, I think would benefit all of our agencies. Thanks, and happy Labor Day weekend.
Thank you, Carolyn. Anyone else have anything to share from their jurisdictions or something they're excited to take back with them? Oh, sorry, John, go ahead. Oh, John, I think you're muted.
There we go. I'm going to brag a little bit on my city. Last month at our first council meeting, we decided to recognize the first responders of Thurston County, and we put together a proclamation, and we are naming the second Saturday of every September to be First Responders Appreciation Day. With that being said, that's next week, next Saturday, from noon to 3 o'clock. We're going to have a First Responders Potluck Barbecue. It's a free event. We'll have hamburgers, hot dogs, soft drinks, live music. We have pony rides for children of all ages. Miss Thurston County may even show up. They have been for the last 5 years. This is a free event. As I said, the nice thing about it is not a political event. It's just to say thank you to all the first responders of Thurston County. Again, it's next Saturday from noon to 3 at Tenino City Park. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Pony rides for all children of all ages, guys.
Yep.
Nino knows how to throw a party. Anything from here? Yeah, Rick, go ahead.
So two things from Lacey Fire District coming up before our next meeting. On September 11th, which is next Sunday, we'll be holding a remembrance ceremony. And that's going to be at the battalion headquarters at Station 31 on Broad Street. It begins at 6:45. Of course, agency partners will also be invited, and I think some have already RSVP'd. And the second is we've got a brand new fire station 34 that's over by the Regional Athletic Center off of Stillicum Road. It opened last year, but we've delayed the open house until this year, and it's scheduled for October 1st. It's a Saturday from 1 to 3 in the afternoon. And everyone's invited.
Thank you, Rick. Cheryl.
Yes, so September is library card sign up month. So I'm encouraging everyone to make sure that you have a library card and to encourage others you know. We are working out the details for another 2-year lease at Capitol Mall for the West Olympia Timberland Library. Wanted to let you know that it's the 11th highest circulation out of the 29 libraries, and that people from all over the 5-county region we serve go to that mall to get library services. And then lastly, we have added numerous libraries to our expanded access hours. That means that if you're 18 and over, you can get a key card access to libraries at Hoodsport, Packwood, Nasell, McCleary, Salcombe, and Ocean Park right now, that you can access these libraries from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily when the staff are not there. I mean, you can also go in when the staff are there as well. So you need to go to those libraries to get one of those libraries to get a key card, because right now, because of the supply chain issues, we cannot provide these cards at every library at this point. Thanks.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing, Cheryl. Are there any other, Bob, go ahead.
A couple things from the Port of Olympia. The Port of Olympia Citizens Advisory Committee is looking for new members. If you or anybody you know would like to be on that advisory committee, there's an application on the port's website. We just revised that application process, so it's much simplified and streamlined, much easier to navigate right now. The other thing is, most of you know that there will be a ballot proposition in November to expand the Port of Olympia and the Board of County Commissioners from 3 members to 5 members. Should that proposition pass, we will be having public hearings to discuss the redistricting that will be put in place next year. In the meantime, we have a committee of myself from the Port of Olympia and County Commissioner Meha, doing a redistricting committee and reviewing what those redistricting lines might look like, so that come November we have some good topics to talk about. So that's it.
That's great. Thank you for sharing, Bob. Sure. Exciting. Any other questions or sharings from your jurisdiction, things you're excited about? Oh, sorry, Chris. I'm so sorry.
Just one on the tag on about the expanding 3 to 5. Unfortunately, state law doesn't allow the PUD to do that without having a major hydroelectric facility like Chelan and Grant County enjoy. So we will be still using the same districts and controlling those, being the entity that determines those districts, even if the county and the port move on to 5, to a system of 5. So I just wanted to let people know that we're not following suit. We can't legally by law.
Thanks for that clarification, Chris. Good to know. Any other sharings? I have something I'll share, but I'll wait and see if anyone else has something to share. Okay, well, guess what, y'all? It's back to school time. School starts next week. I don't know if Mel's still in here, but it's a good reminder. We have, in Olympia, we have a little less than 10,000 students. There's a slightly fewer in Tumwater, slightly more in North Thurston. Maybe about half that many in Yelm, or maybe like 5,000 or 6,000. And, you know, they're gonna be out riding their bikes and walking to school. There's gonna be parents who are, haven't been driving kids to school for a couple of blessed months. So I just would ask everybody's like compassion and patience with us getting back into the swing of things and cheering on our youngest commuters who are choosing active transportation, which is great for their bodies and for our communities as well. A number of our board members are excited to participate in the week without driving to the extent of our abilities. It's made us have some interesting conversations about our responsibilities to family members who maybe have a disability status. And our student representatives are also very excited to participate as they are able to. So we report back on that later. And I am really excited to share out with my board a little bit about the call for projects process and how that has been evolving. You know, school districts cross many jurisdictions. I think part of the Olympia School District is in Tumwater, the county, Olympia, maybe even Lacey. We cross a lot of jurisdictions. And so thinking about how that call for projects process impacts those slightly less than 10,000 tiny commuters every day that's really important stuff for us to keep our eyes on. And just want to shout out the appreciation for that again. And also I want to give a shout out on the audit report from this last audit report. So great job to staff. So appreciate the attention to detail, the stewardship of the organization. That kind of credibility is what helps us do all of our good work, because we can go out into the field knowing like this is a solid organization and it's run at the highest level of integrity and responsibility. So thank you to staff. Those of you who are on staff, thank you very much for that great work. Are there any other additional share outs from members? All right. Seeing none, I will give you the gift of time, and we are adjourned. See you next month, guys.
Bye-bye.